Hello, everybody. This is the Catholic Esquire. I normally try not to make videos on Sunday, but I thought it was necessary to do so today in light of recent news in the church and in light of the traditional Latin Mass gospel reading today, actually, as well. Just got back from Mass a couple hours ago, and something in that gospel today sparked me to do this. So here's the situation. I think any of you who have been following church news are aware that the Vatican has basically canceled Bishop Strickland in Tyler, Texas. They basically removed him after he refused to resign from his position as the bishop at Tyler, Texas. They effectively removed him from his job, booting him out of that position. Of course, we all know why. He very clearly stood up to the modernist efforts, especially with the Synod on Synodality lately. He's been very vocal about protecting the tradition in the church, even the traditional Latin Mass. Even though I don't even consider Bishop Tyler necessarily a traditionalist priest, I think he's very well aware of the value of tradition and the importance of maintaining it in the face of the sheer effort out of Francis and the Vatican and his cronies to destroy it. So he's a good guy, he's a good bishop, and he's one that I think most traditionalists understand we need to support. Now the question is how do lay people respond to this? How can lay people correctly with maintaining their roles fight back? What do we do in these situations? And I've seen answers on extremes from both ends. I've seen on one hand people say, just as recently as yesterday, some woman posts on Twitter that she's basically lost faith in the church because how could you have such an evil, nasty pope? And expressed her desire to leave the church. That's one extreme. On the other extreme, there's the fence sitters, the people who absolutely won't take a position on this at all. They're afraid of what other people will say about them. They're afraid of losing their financial backing, depending on if they have financial relationship with the church. And rather than asking the question about, well, what is wrong with the Vatican? What is wrong with Francis? Asking those important questions about, is this guy even legitimate? Is he even Pope? Just asking the question. Instead of doing that, they take the easy way out and just rip on Bishop Strickland and call him disobedient and basically gloat and glee over his dismissal. That's the other extreme. So what is it really lay Catholics are supposed to do? Practically speaking, obviously, it's impossible for us to go into the Vatican, invade it, and depose Francis. That would be nice. Boot him out of that office, hold a trial on his legitimacy, on what he's claiming, whether he really has any claim whatsoever at the chair of Peter. We would love to have that trial, and unfortunately, no one in the Vatican's going to do it. It's obviously impractical for lay people, especially here in the United States, to force that to happen at this time. But I think there are things that we can do without completely apostatizing, rejecting the faith of Jesus Christ, as so many are doing, on the other extreme. And, and to give you an example, I wanted to point you to this book. It's Cranmer's Godly Order. It's written by Michael Davies. Fantastic book. And one of the stories in there he talks about is what happened when faithful Catholics in England were forced to attend a new mass back in the 16th century, shortly after the death of Henry VIII. As you may remember, of course, Henry VIII broke away from the church, and he had this new Archbishop Cranmer, appointed. But it wasn't until after Henry VIII died that Cranmer started making changes to the Mass under the authority of the Church of England, which had rejected the Catholic faith. And interestingly, and this isn't the point of this video today, but interestingly, some of those changes included going from saying mass in the vernacular, removing the high altars and replacing them with freestanding altar tables, instituting communion in the hand. All of these things were rejected by the Council of Trent afterwards. And interestingly, that's pretty much now what we have in the Novus Ordo Mass. That's part of the reason why Davies included that in this book, because this book is the first part of a series called The Liturgical Revolution, and it really did begin with Protestantism. But the reason I mention this book is because during this time of change and liturgical revolution, there were real Catholics out there saying, "What is going on? What can we do about this? We are not going to accept these lies from these people who claim to have authority over us in religious and liturgical matters. We're not going to sit down and accept this." And they didn't. They literally went to war over it. And they did it because they said, "We're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to do this new mass." And the response was, perhaps predictably, that the king, the Cranmer, under the authority of the king at that point, the new king, Henry's son, came in with literal troops to mow down these peasants who gathered together, and yes, rebellion against these changes by evil modern heretics. How many Catholics today would be willing to lose their life for something like the liturgy, the Mass? They're not even willing to give up a few bucks on their YouTube channel to criticize evil Francis and his evil minions, when the truth is obviously right in front of them. And these Catholics in England in the 16th century, these peasants who most of them couldn't even read, they didn't go to Steubenville. They didn't get theology degrees. They don't have YouTube channels. They just saw something that was wrong in front of them, and they did something about it that was within their ability. They weren't going to go to Rome. They're not going to travel across Rome. They're not going to go assassinate the king. They were just making a stand on that issue and expressing their displeasure, and were willing to die for it. I wrote an article at the CatholicEsquire.com about this a couple of years ago, and I included a quote in there from Michael Davies in the book. I'm just going to read it to you real quick. Michael Davies says about these peasants, these villagers, he says, "They were making a stand for something which deep within them they were convinced was right, something that involved their roots and their eternal destiny. Scholars could and would belittle them, Cranmer would and could sneer at them, but it is not always those who are able to put forward the most eloquent case for their cause who are in the right." Page 238 of Cranmer's Godly Order by Michael Davies. So, my friends, I just give you that story to think about. And why did I mention the gospel at the beginning of this video? I mentioned the gospel at the beginning of the video because while we need to be masculine about this, we need to take bold stands against evil, and we need to stand up for the truth. At the same time, we have to realize the reality of the situation, that this is ultimately under the control of God. The gospel reading for today talked about how the master had planted good seed and the evil one came in and planted weeds, and they ended up growing together. And the servants, desperately wanting to serve the master, said, "Why don't we go and pull those weeds now?" And the master said, "No, no, no, no. You can't do that. You might risk pulling out the good ones. I will take care of this at the end of the growing season, but not now. The weeds and the good fruit will grow together. The good wheat will grow together." And basically, the master was reprimanding the servants for stepping on the toes of the master. And there's something we need to learn about that as well. We were put at this time, we were born in this time, in this place for a reason, my friends. Clearly, the Lord has allowed what we're seeing to happen inside his church with bad weeds. Nothing within his church, nothing about his church, of course, but I'm talking about the people that have managed to hijack the church or the bad weeds. We have to acknowledge their existence there, and we have to acknowledge the reality that God has allowed these bad weeds to fester. And so I think what we need to do is just focus ourselves on what we can do within our role, just like the peasants in England, but not back down from doing that. We have an ability to take action within our scope. Let's do it. Let's do it. I hope this video helped. If you find it useful, share it with your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel. As always, my friend, pray for the church, pray for Bishop Strickland, pray for purification and restoration of the true holy Catholic Church in Rome, and God bless.